All right, thanks for that introduction, Peter, and thanks as well for allowing me to speak after everybody's had a drink, which is it's quite useful. You're probably wondering why me and Stafford. We've actually just established a new company. The firm's name is Massive Gap. I didn't just put it there because I thought it sounded cool. It's the name of a company that we're getting off the ground, and so Peter asked us to come and engage with you this evening. Now, when I'm not doing Massive Gap and writing good and bad things about Vodacom, one of the other things I do is a weekly radio show on a little station called 5FM. And we talk about technology, and I allow people to phone in and they ask me questions about technology. Some of my favorites, for example, are what is the difference between 3G and Wi-Fi? When it rains, my DSTV goes funny, why? And my favorite one is my laptop's Wi-Fi connection stops working when the electricity goes off. I don't know what's going on. And so I'm used to speaking to crowds where that's the level of technical understanding. And when I'm asked to speak to, oh really, is it not much difference? Okay, good. Yeah. So 3G versus Wi-Fi now. So when I get asked to speak to technology people, it's exciting for me because we all speak the same language. It's like a religion. When I walk into those rooms of people who don't understand technology, I always look for the guys engaged in BlackBerry prayer. You know the BlackBerry prayer? Make apps, Mensa, and then could talk technology. Anyway, so in looking at the talk tonight, I'm talking about consumers, talking about technology. Peter said, come and show us the latest, greatest things in the world. And so I thought, well, let's not start by talking about technology at all. Let's go to the oldest of human sciences, which is anthropology. Bear with me, there's a good reason why I want to talk about people. Because, and it's not always immediately obvious, but your customers are actually people. You know, I know, shock, or but they are actually people. And there's a fundamental shift happening at the moment in the world of technology, right? I have tried to coin a term, I call it Anthropotech. And one of my editors said to me, what are you going to call your new column? And I said, Anthropotech. And she said, there's one syllable too many. Nobody's ever going to. So I've ditched that. But I'm trying to find a good term. Maybe you can help me with this move that's happening in technology at the moment, because it's fundamental, and it's exciting, and it's changing the game for everybody, and it's happening under our noses right now. And so I want to highlight that before we look at where it's taking us from a progress perspective. I just finished reading this book by Tom Kelly. He's one of the directors at IDEO, which is one of my favorite companies in the world. And it's called The 10 Faces of Innovation, as you might have guessed. And in this book, he identifies these key characters or roles within an organization that drive innovation forward. And so he's got the director, he's got the set creator or designer, the storyteller. But first and foremost is the anthropologist, okay? Looking at customers who happen to be people. And he talks about a challenge that IDEO was set. Now, anybody who's traveled in Europe on trains that go underground will recognize these kiosks where they sell rubbish mostly, but drinks is the focal point here. And the challenge was, in Warsaw, at the subway station kiosks, how would you increase sales? It's a tougher challenge than it sounds. How do you increase sales at a kiosk in a subway station? And so what IDEO did was they put cameras on the station platform, and they watched passengers waiting for trains. And what they found was people would stand, they'd look up at the board announcing when the next train would arrive. They'd stand next to the tracks and they'd look down the track to see if they could see the train. They'd look at the kiosk and go, oh, I'm a little bit thirsty, and then they'd look at their watch and they'd get a bit apprehensive and they'd stay where they were. And so they rapid prototyped some plastic kitchen clocks that they put up at these kiosks, and sales went up 40% because now people could walk up to the kiosk and they could see the time, and they didn't feel as apprehensive. They didn't feel like they needed to watch the tracks, and they watched the whole time, and they were quite comfortable at the kiosk. The problem was solved, and it's a simple example, by watching people, customers. Because what we tend to do is focus on the product, focus on the storefront. You know, how can we improve our business? But if you shift that around and you look at your customers and the people engaging with those products, then the answers sometimes become quite clear. And so this fundamental shift that's happening in the world of technology, I believe, is that it started to watch the people on the platform. And so a useful analogy for me is the automobile industry. The Chevrolet Motor Company turned 100 years old this year. If you go back to 1911, that was the first Chevy C-Series. And drivers of cars back then were kind of ancillary. The focus was on engineering. It was on the engine. It was the things that made the car move forward, right? And if you wanted to drive one of those back then, you had to know a thing or two about that engine. Because chances are, from A to B, it was going to break down at least once. You'd have to be able to open the hood. You'd have to know what to do with the things under the hood to get that car back on the road. Back then, you would get a toolkit with your car that they'd install in your garage so that you could work on it yourself. And some engineering knowledge was required, or mechanical knowledge anyway. Chevy's moved on somewhat in the last 100 years, and this automobile industry has made a transition. And now, drivers are not ancillary, they're core to how the product is developed. When you buy a car as well, it's become an emotional decision. The mechanics, not so important anymore. I just bought my wife one of these. It's got 5 seats and 2 extra ones that slap up in the back. The focus is clearly on passenger safety, driver comfort, air conditioning, airbags, etc., etc. The engine now is almost an afterthought. I don't know how to pop the bonnet on it. If I did, open the hood up, there'd be a block of plastic. I wouldn't know what to do with the block of plastic. There's a guy with a laptop that plugs into the block of plastic so that he can take the plastic out and put another one in, and then it goes again. I'm not worried about the engine. A friend of mine watched one of my talks. He said, you need more graphs, so I made this one. 1911, engine space versus people space. 2011, you get the idea, right? Made some graphs. All right, the analogy is kind of obvious, but that's what computers used to look like. Worldwide market of 4, not too sure what the guy does. He punches it around. It's all about the computer. The guy doesn't matter. Skip forward. Okay, things didn't get better immediately, all right? They didn't immediately get friendly. Amazing, you can have a personal computer at home. I remember my dad bringing home one of these, an 8086. I couldn't get this thing to do anything before I learned what the autoexec.bat file did, what the config.sys file did, what to tell my dad when he got home and I'd erased the hard drive with all of his work, okay? But we're getting there now. I love this slide. And thankfully nobody from Microsoft is here. This is Word, okay? Not very long ago, with all of the toolbars open. What do those things do? What are all those? You know, somebody sat, yeah. It's like italics, bold, underline. Who sat down and thought that this was a clever interface for human beings to use? I don't understand it. And then skip forward 10 years, and it didn't get much better immediately. But then this man came along. I don't want to carry on about Steve Jobs. I'm a bit of a fan. But the iPad hit stores last year. No screws. I don't know how to open it. If I did know how to open it, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But it's profoundly useful. It's focused on the user, the passenger, the person who has to use it. Nobody knows what's happening inside this thing. Nobody cares. All they care about is what they can do with it. We're still figuring out exactly what the applications are for this new era of personal computer. It's already started to replace things that we wouldn't do on computers before, like reading a newspaper, for example. I've seen fantastic applications for the disabled. I recently met with an autistic school that's using them. There are a lot to figure out.
Get Newsday every day.
It's not exactly like a newspaper, okay? But we're getting there. So we're starting to figure this out, all right? But a lot of technologists I speak to will tell you we've arrived at the end point already. Here we are, computing nirvana, the iPad exists, end of story. No, we've only just begun figuring out what to do with this stuff. This is a topographic, I must get this right, I've got it written here, no I don't. Aggregated view of the network topology of the internet. I know there's some engineers here. That's literally a visualization of all of the connections in the internet at the moment as a graph which is round because the world is round, I suppose. I don't know. But it's growing all the time. And we're bringing all these devices online. And we're starting to realize that a lot of devices that before we didn't picture being online could be, and maybe that would be useful, right? And so I love the analogy of electricity, because when it was first invented, shown off, Jefferson getting shocked by lightning, it was Jefferson, right? Yeah. People thought the only application for this stuff is light bulbs. We have light in our houses now, fantastic. Think of all the things that work with electricity now. And think of all the things that could work with the internet. I met with a company recently in Europe, they're from Argentina. They're putting Wi-Fi chips into light bulbs. You go, what? And they go, well, if you have all of your light bulbs on a network, you can start to do really clever things with how you control light in the home, how you measure your consumption. Starting to make sense. But we still have a long way to go. And like the guy smacking the fly with the iPad, doesn't always work out. Does anybody know what an ocarina is? It's a musical instrument, goes back to ancient China. Bear with me, because I love this example, right? So there's this company in the States, and they wrote this application for the iPhone called Ocarina. And what it allows you to do is play the ocarina on your iPhone. I'm just going to switch to a camera there. So you blow in here, and you can play. That's not very useful, but if you click on the world, there's a little globe icon here. If you click on that, it brings up a picture of the Earth. I don't know if you can see that. Up, left, right. I'm so confused. There we go. And now we're listening to somebody on the east coast of the United States, it looked like, who's playing the ocarina. And so this person's name is just 213, and he could be sitting at his desk at work right now, could be sitting in his room, he could be making his name cut in front of a room full of people, okay? But he's playing this instrument in America, and I'm listening to it right here. So I can immediately see who else in the world is running the most useless application in the world, okay? So a lot of experimenting going on, and I want to make a point about that in a moment. But we're going to figure this stuff out. This was my youngest son when he was 2. This was the first time he saw an iPad when I brought it home last year in April. He had played with my iPhone before, familiar interface, flipped through it. No problem, there's my game, lekker, fishies. Off we go, okay? He can't read, he's not literate, and he's using a computer. There has to be some very useful things we can do with this stuff. Funnily enough, I spoke to a CEO recently who walked into his boardroom with an iPad just after they came out. Went to the CTO, said, I got a new computer, I'm not using my laptop anymore, make this work. The CTO looked at the iPad and went, but business intelligence systems and security policies, and he said, my 2-year-old can use this thing, why can't you? So it's shaking up enterprise technology a hell of a lot as well. And that's really the point of this anthropological, human-centric technology, is that it's driven by consumerism. I love this example. People getting hold of technology and figuring out what to do with it, okay? Applications that Apple probably wouldn't have thought of. This is a band called Atomic Tom. Their instruments were stolen. So I thought, well, let's see how far we can get making music using just iPhones and instrument applications that we get hold of. Now, some of you might have seen this. I don't know why did they do it on a subway? I'm sitting on a tray. Whatever. It's pretty impressive though. Guitars. Bass, I suppose. She enjoys it. And so there's this fixation now. There's technology that has shifted focus. Apple didn't guess probably when they were developing the iPhone that it would make a pretty good musical instrument, okay? Customers figured that one out. And when you give technology like that to customers, interesting things happen. And it happens because it piques their interest. I'm busy reading this book, I haven't finished it yet, by Sally Hogshead, Fascinate, about what fascinates us, about how fascination drives all of our decision making. And what happens when you fascinate somebody and you allow them to be fascinated by your products. And so now, we're starting to see some really useful applications come in the space. This is a company from Europe. I'm bringing them out for a conference at the end of the year called Digital Life Experience. And they're developing augmented reality advertising using mobile smartphones. So this first example isn't great. He's got a poster, he's holding up his Android device, and it's overlaying information on top of the poster. Okay? And we've all seen examples like this, Layer, the augmented reality browser, for example. But these guys are starting to do really amazing things with advertising. The Layer browser is amazing, by the way. You can download it for your phone. It's free. You can use it to put graffiti on buildings, for example. So when your friends come and they look around using the browser, they can see notes you've left for them. Mostly they'll see something that a 16-year-old's done on the side of the building, which is disgusting. But they could see that as well. So there's an advert for the Samsung Galaxy S, for example. Comes alive on his screen. He can see the applications running on the device. It's overlaid with information, perhaps, about what networks it's available on. My favorite example is coming next, though. This is a prototype that they did with Omega watches. Short instructional thing at the bottom. Take out your phone, load this application, point it at the advert, right? The watch pops out of the advert, so you can take a good look at it. You can fit a lot more information onto the page than you would have otherwise been able to. But then you can also try the watch on, which you will hopefully do momentarily. Yes, it's James Bond. Try on the watch. There we go. Okay. So put your arm in there. Looks pretty good. Let's try another watch face. It's like seriously useful stuff happening now. They're doing something especially for the South African market when they come at the end of the year, so I'm looking forward to that one. Okay, I won't play you too many more videos. But this is becoming a powerful marketing tool too. As people sort of, at a subconscious level, start to realize what technology is meaning in their lives and where it's going, technology companies are starting to leverage this from a marketing perspective. I met with David Roman earlier this year. He used to work for HP. He did the Computer is Personal again. Remember those billboards and advertising all over the place? Great campaign. He was poached by Lenovo. And at that stage, when I met him at the beginning of the year, he was working on this campaign. Okay, this is the new advert that Lenovo put out now.
Powered creation engines perfectly optimized to help the people who do.
Fantastic advertising.
Do better.
You can't hear the audio, but it's making the point that Lenovo is a company committed to making products that you can actually do things with that are useful.
Things happen. Lenovo, for those who do.
Fantastic payoff line, I think. Tagline, for those who do. All right, I want to play you this video.
So, it's only 10
because I want you to try and guess which company put this out, right? It's a video about consumerization, aimed at educating the market about the benefits of consumerization, because it can be a little bit scary for organizations when the CEO does walk in with the iPad and go make it work, and it doesn't conform to policy. People are used to their companies upgrading their laptops every 3 years, for example, and now Steve Jobs is bringing out a new iPad every year. It's disruptive. The whole concept of ownership has shifted away from the organization to the individual bringing his own gadgets into the workplace. And so this makes the point that, that this isn't something to be fought, that this is something to be embraced.
And while you're trying to explain these things to Jimbo,
so when I usually ask this question in smaller rooms, people guess maybe Evernote or Dropbox made this advert, perhaps Google.
Supposed to be making the IT decisions around here? Isn't it your job to provide employees the technology they need to do their jobs well, while factoring in things like budgets and security? At least that's how it used to be. People showed up in the morning, used whatever technology you provided them, did their jobs, and went home. And everyone started over the next morning. Things are changing. People have access to better and cheaper personal technology than they've ever had before. And technology isn't just changing how people work in general, it's actually blurring the lines between work and life by giving folks more influence and choice over how and where they work and what technology they use to get things done. This is consumerization, and it's impacting you and your company. Your job is to keep things safe, secure, and working properly. So how do you handle the risks that come with consumerization? Answer: you embrace the risks responsibly because the resulting opportunities are even greater. Consumerization is an opportunity for you to help people work in ways that better suit their jobs and their personalities. It's an opportunity to provide people with technology that makes them more productive and makes their work more enjoyable. Last time we checked, both of those things are good for business. So you have a choice. You can choose to resist consumerization, or you can choose to embrace consumerization responsibly and become a spearhead for the change it brings within your organization. Consumerization is happening, and it's good. Your organization becomes more productive with more choice. Jimbo is happy, and you're the hero. So if you're willing to say yes to the opportunities that consumerization
we know about
brings,
this stuff.
Microsoft is here to help.
New Microsoft campaign launched a month and a half ago. So even the guys who made that interface for Word are on board now with consumerization and where it's taking us. I like the part of that video where they talk about work-life balance. Quickly want to touch on that. Because we've had this concept in the past that these are modularly different concepts, work and life. The last time I checked, I was very much alive when I was at work, but there was this idea before that at work you were just a crone and then, you know, a zombie, and then you'd go home and suddenly you were alive again. So I like that. It's still very confusing. That's an image of the Library of Babel, which was fictionalized by Jorge Luis Borges, an author who imagined this library where every book that could possibly be assembled, 400 pages long, with a random assignment of letters, was in this library. So it stands to reason that in the library you would find a book about the library, a book about the meaning of life, a book that explained what the library did, and a catalog of all the books in the library, but nobody knows where to find it. And so I want to move the discussion to online, focus a little bit more on that, because I think that's where one of the big challenges lie at the moment. This is one of my favorite photographs. It was made by NASA. They composited a lot of photographs from satellites taken of the world at night as it passed around the globe. And the first thing that stands out, of course, is all of this light in the northern hemisphere. And then in the south, we're kind of still in the dark. And as a South African, the first thing I did when I saw this picture was I looked at Australia and I was like, actually, we're okay. They're a bit dim in Australia. Is there an Australian in the room? Fantastic. You'll get there one day. We can help you. Something I do quite regularly is I log on to speedtest.net, and you can see internet service providers around the world ranked by quality of performance and speed, and you can also rank it by country. So this number is the average connection speed in Korea, according to speedtest.net. That's downstream. Just on about 40 megabits per second is what you can expect on average in South Korea. In South Africa, 3.2. Got some way to go. But what I'm more interested about from an African perspective is these numbers, right? This is upload speeds. So once again, South Korea is number one, 21.15 megabits per second up. South Africa is number 89 with give or take about 1 megabit per second up. Now, bearing in mind that speedtest.net is the kind of person who would want to test their connection and probably has access to better quality of bandwidth than, say, somebody in rural South Africa. But it's a promising sign, because since I've been tracking this, in a year we went from 109th in the world to 89th in the world for upload speeds, right? And so why this intrigues me is because upload is the business going forward. Because this consumerization drive, this giving people powerful technology, enables them to be the creators of what's online, enables them to put stuff into the cloud, okay? It's not the one-way stream out of the cloud anymore to the end user. That's been flipped on its head. And there are amazing things happening in storage. Out of all my technology slides that I didn't want to waste your time with, I just kept some of these. We're all familiar with Moore's Law. There's some amazing laws that talk about both bitrate and storage. Nielsen's law is one of them. And when you start tracking how storage is growing and internet connectivity is keeping pace, you can see, according to Nielsen's law, for example, this is internet connectivity bits per second over the years. And it's steadily climbing at a pretty predictable rate in a similar way that Moore's law is progressing and has for the last 4 decades. Butter's law is another one. The amount of data coming out of an optical fiber is doubling every 9 months. So the cost of transmitting a bit over an optical network decreases by half every 9 months. Okay, not always in South Africa, but we're getting there. Kreider's law, which I find fascinating, looking at capacity of gigabytes stored over the years and projecting to 2020, when a 2-disc, 2.5-inch disk drive will be capable of storing more than 14 terabytes and will cost about $40. That could be in a device that fits in your pocket. And so what happens when Africans get online? Because we haven't seen that before. We've seen a lot of stuff created by people on the west coast of America, like musical instruments that you can play to each other across the globe. Not incredibly useful. This is one of my favorite African examples, Ushahidi from Kenya, developed in 2007 in the post-election violence in that country, used by citizens with an SMS interface. The Ushahidi server is open source, that runs in the cloud, but they enabled it with SMS so that normal Kenyans could SMS the server, and it would build heat maps of post-election violence in Kenya, right? Because it's open source, anybody can use it. It's since been used to track the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, post-earthquake relief in Chile. In the recent crisis in Japan, Ushahidi was deployed to track things there. Incredibly useful, born of necessity, and shared with the world for free. And I like that. I like that when Africans get online, we're increasingly seeing that we're a bunch that likes sharing, do useful things. And the connectivity is coming. This is a picture I took of CCOM when it landed. I love the fact that that little yellow cable is what all the hype's about. It's encased in titanium so that ships don't destroy it or sharks don't eat it, or I don't know. But that's what the big deal is, and it's all coming. This is a company I spoke to in Barcelona last year. Their CEO gave me a briefing. They're called VNL. They do cellular infrastructure. So you can see the little antenna sticking out over there in rural India. Completely solar powered, packs up into 2 crates that fit on the back of a bakkie, can be assembled anywhere on top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere, completely solar powered. He said they did a pilot in Mumbai where it's incredibly foggy, and even there this thing would manage to power itself. It uses mesh networking, so they don't have to roll out cabling to it apparently. It'll pick up I don't know exactly how they mesh in a cellular environment. I didn't understand. That's where he kind of lost me. But it's happening. LTE, I don't want to spend too much time on. You guys know all about that. This was a bus I saw in Barcelona. Motorola was doing an LTE display in 2009. 8 HD channels streaming to the bus, 3 streaming from the bus. Incredible things happening as our wireless technology progresses as well. And then these consumer devices, increasing in capacity, increasing in usefulness, profoundly so, and coming down in price, most importantly. And then I think of the potential in Africa, in education especially, and this is something Peter speaks about a lot, is what happens when we can get these devices out there? What happens when we can put them into schools? Remember that video of my son, 2 years old, can't read but can use the computer? You know, in my day, you learned how to read, then you learned how to use a computer. Now, learn how to use a computer, and the computer can teach you how to read. It's happening. I'm seeing it with my kids. They've got so many educational applications running on an iPad, teaching them stuff. And so those are the points I want to leave you with. Powerful computing devices, I said, massive storage capacities, ubiquitous broadband, cheap and accessible, democratized, and what happens when the lights switch on down here and we can start engaging as Africans in this world. And maybe Australia will catch up on that too. So I want to leave you with that. Stafford's going to be up in not too long and talk you through some of the other amazing things happening in the world. But thank you very much.